Um, Good morning, everyone. And today I will talk about the two retailers in Russia, which we find very interesting. And one of these retailers is expanding in Europe very fast and is expanding in Serbia very fast. So I hope that the story of these two retailers, which we call disruptive retailers, will be interesting for you and perhaps will give you some lessons and something to think about for the future. Now, well, clearly, these retailers, they haven't started to operate in Russia yesterday, right? So in fact, there has been a few years that they've been around in Russia, but they've just been noticed by the retail community last year. So the same time, the question is, uh, was that too late that the large retailers noticed these two disruptors, or the situation is okay, the situation is under control, and the large retailers can respond in a timely manner to what these retailers are doing? So hopefully, my today's presentation will give you some inspiration if you are a retailer or if you're a manufacturer, give you some food for thought about how these types of retailers, which we call disruptive retailers, retailers which are different from the rest, expand, and how you can react or adapt to their expansion. Now, quickly, what I want to start with, I've already used the word disrupt or disruptor a couple of times, right? So I would like to define what do I mean by this word. So according to the definition, right, there's a disruptor, something that prevents us to do things as usual, right? Something prevents us doing something as we have been usually doing. And obviously, there is a positive and there's a negative meaning to the disruptor, right? So a person can be disruptive and can prevent us from doing something as we expected to do, or a company which is changing the traditional way of doing business. And I'm going to talk particularly about the retail business, and sets the new benchmarks, or forces the industry or large retailers to operate differently. This is a definition of a disruptor. Another definition of disruptor could be also an innovator, but clearly this is the type of innovator which has scalable innovation, right? Such innovation which is then gets replicated by the industry leaders, or something big happens in the channel or in the industry. Now, so I will talk about the two retailers, right, which we define as disruptive retailers, and these two retailers have quite different approaches. One of them is called Svetofor. So Svetofor in Russian means a traffic light, Svetofor or semaphore, and it has a couple of different banners, but the main banner of it is Svetofor in Russia. And another retailer, which is also a disruptor, is called Vkusville. Now, Vkus means taste or tasty in Russian, and ville stands for the French word for a town or a city, right? So Vkusville, it essentially means the city of taste or the town of taste. And this retailer positions itself as a healthy food store. So think about it. Not always we see that healthy foods are perceived as tasty. Now, this particular retailer positioned itself as a healthy food store, магазин здоровых продуктов, здорового питания, and at the same time it has the word taste in its name. So how did it all start? Now, all these new formats, right, the disruptive formats, they all started back in 2014 in Russia. And well, I would not be completely honest with you if I would say that back then we could say that the new Cold War started between Russia and the US. And all kinds of political actions which happened, they really had a massive effect on the Russian economy, on the Russian consumers. Mainly, this was negative effects because the U.S. sanctions had lots of negative effects on the Russian economy. Russian ruble was devaluated, And all of this really caused a big and long-term economic crisis in Russia and the continued impoverishment of the Russian consumers, right? And I purposely use the word impoverishment because I believe that this is the right way to describe it rather than just saying economic downturn or economic crisis. So Russia responded with the counter sanctions, right? Which means that certain products were not allowed and still are not allowed to be imported from European Union and the United States. And Russia launched the import substitution policy, which essentially means that they've encouraged local manufacturers to produce and to manufacture things within Russia and to put this through the retail channels. So all of this caused small regional retailers to experiment, and we've got the new format. New format was born essentially back then, and the format was called warehouse discounter, right? So it's a hybrid between a warehouse and a discount store, and Svetofor was one of them. So the point is that many have tried, but Svetofor is the one who has succeeded in Russia and who had grown the business to big proportions now. These are the pictures of how the store looks. So it does look like a warehouse. So it's a very, very simple discounter, right? A very, very hard discounter, if I could say. Was that the only model for discounters in Russia which had been growing over the years? No, of course not. Right, so we have some retailers such as OK Group, for example, who have launched discounters as well, but they've launched the German model. Right, so they were really careful copying the German discount model in Russia, and they have grown to certain proportions, but they are slower, and it takes a lot more time to really follow the German model in Russia and to copy it and to imitate it. Right, so there are all kinds of problems with this model when it comes to Russia, right? So the lack of suitable locations, it's difficult and it takes time to find the right manufacturers, and to build this predictable partnerships with the manufacturers for private labels, and also it takes a discipline overall, right, to follow the German discount principles, right, to follow the German discount rules. So anyway, this company have taken this approach. They were successful. They keep growing. I mean, right now it is a large proportion of their business, but still they were not as fast as Svetofor. Now Svetofor, which belongs to Schneider brothers. So these are the two brothers of a German descent who live in Siberia. They have really redefined what discounter could be, right? And the business model which they've launched was as such, right? So very, very simple stores located in the places which are not suitable for typical retail, right? So this way, they didn't really compete with the other retailers in Russia, with the large retailers in Russia, because they have taken places which other retailers didn't want to open stores. What they were selling? Well, anything. They were selling any kind of products, predominantly food, of course, but like I said, anything goes as long as it's legal to sell it. They were selling at a very, very low price, very cheap, not comparable to any other products which are on the market. And if indeed you do find certain products which are the same and you start to compare, you do see a price difference of 2 times or 3 times cheaper in Svetofor than anywhere else. And in terms of promotions, they position themselves as basket builders. So they, like I said, they mainly sell food, but there is a fair amount of non-food in assortment. So if it is furniture for your garden, or if it is some cheap clothing for for your children, they would sell that as well. So these were the main points of the business model of Svetofor, the Schneider Brothers business, and it has grown a lot and became very, very successful in Russia. So over these years, how did the large retailers, X5 Retail, Magnet, how did they respond to a disruptor? Well, the answer is they didn't really respond up until last year. So both two largest retailers, Magnit and X5, right? They have seen the discounter, they have seen Svetofor, they have acknowledged that, well, it exists and it is competing with them. But because they have so many stores, right? They have over 30,000 stores in Russia, both of them. And because they're so much focused on competing against each other, they didn't really make a decision to respond early. And so, since 2014, Svetofor has been growing and growing and growing in Russia, and there were no large retailers who really made a specific effort to compete with Svetofor directly. Now, what happens now? Now we see that now Svetofor in Russia has gained significant scale, right? So it is number 7 in terms of the rankings by retail sales in Russia amongst grocery retailers. And the model has taken shape as such, right? So they are aiming for places in Russia with 15,000 people living around the stores, 15,000 households. Monthly revenues of the store can range anywhere from 110 to 110,000 euros to 550. And they're on average selling 2,000 SKUs on 1,000 of square meter space. Sourcing is local, mainly local when it comes to regional parts of Russia, but also somewhat national and right now international, as Svetofor is expanding in Europe. But the 3 business model trade-offs, which I would like to highlight, which are very important, are these, right? So first, gross profit, right? Cash gross profit is more important for this retailer than gross margin percentage. Second, this retailer is about basket. So for any products which they sell, for any products that they list on the permanent or on the in and out basis, they're going to be looking for products which will drive basket growth rather than frequency. And third, this retailer is about product. So it doesn't care about brands. It doesn't care about what types of brands it sells, nationals or local. It's all about specific products, right? Food or non-food, which it sells. So these are the 3 main principles that remain very important for Svetofor business model. And now what we see is this model is becoming international, and Svetofor is expanding in Europe very, very fast. Now they have chosen Mere for some of the countries which doesn't use Cyrillic alphabet, but the model as we see it right now is pretty much the same as in Russia. So in Russia, they have over 2,000 stores already, and they're expanding. I believe there are few stores in Serbia. More and more countries are being explored for Svetofor's expansion. The reason for that? Well, this is the time in Russia for Svetofor to really offset the local risks. So as they become bigger and bigger in Russia, largest retailers in Russia, they are becoming more worried. So to lower the local risk of regulation, antitrust, various lobbying efforts, Svetofor has chosen to expand and to test this model in other countries. What's next? Now, first of all, we can see that last year, both X5 and Magnit and some of the other largest retailers such as Lenta, they all have acknowledged the fact that Svetofor is large and Svetofor is a competitor. Although it is not a direct competitor in terms of their format, right? Because like I said, the Svetofor format actually is competing more with hypermarkets. It's competing more for a big basket and a big stock-up trip. The largest retailers, such as X5, Magnit, and Lenta, they now have started their versions of such stores. So this warehouse discounter, this becomes a national trend now, as the large retailers started to open similar stores in Russia. And we will see how Svetofor responds to it. I think the next stage for them is try something different, possibly open smaller stores, possibly enter more expensive locations such as urban logistics, Perhaps Svetafor would think about online, which they're also testing right now in Russia, but we just early to say how it's going to develop. And finally, they would think about own labels, right? Because up until now, Svetafor hasn't been investing in marketing or in developing on the products of their own private labels. So perhaps this is going to be the next stage for them to respond to finally emerged competition from the large retailers. And just linking this to the notion of private labels and own labels and how they might develop further, I think Russia is now at the stage that more and more retailers are going to think about how to build private label, how to expand and how to evolve private label into something more advanced as it is today. And I think that this is an opportunity for international manufacturers who might be considering Russia for entry and might be considering Russia as a retail market. What we see right now is the largest retailers in Russia, the share of private label sales is pretty small. And number one retailer in Russia, X5 Retail, it's only near 20% of their sales. Magnet is even lower, it's about 10%. And speaking of this private label, this is how we've seen the second disruptor, which I wanted to talk to you about, Vkusvil, come into place. Now, Vkusvil, right, and essentially the name means the town of taste, right, the town of taste and a grocery store for healthy products. They established all their business model around private label. So up until recently, up until this year, Vkusvil have not been selling any brands at all. And their business philosophy is set on these three principles. First, just like Svetafor, it is about product, not about brand, right? So if they're selling products, they make emphasis on the certain products, not brands. Second, they don't think categories, they think consumption occasions. Right? So whether it's a breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or afternoon snack, or whatever it could be, but the mentality, the philosophy of assortment, of building the assortment, this is not about category. This is about different consumption occasions. And Vkusvil is not really implementing a classic marketing business model inside, right? So it doesn't have marketing. It just has certain values, right? Such as quality of foods, such as honest discussion with consumers about their production and what the products are made of. So this store is all about these certain values and not traditional marketing. So Vkusvil, it's this way, being, well, the only retailer as such in Russia, it's also became a big disruptor, and it became a benchmark in terms of what quality should stand for, and what private label strategy could stand for. As an example, if you think about private label, it's helpful to think of it as, is private label reflective or is it glowing? By reflective, I mean when private label is designed with similar graphics and a similar story as big national brands. Now, Vkusvil wasn't like this. Vkusvil private labels are unique. They are difficult to copy, so that way they are glowing on its own, right? They're not reflecting the light, they're producing the light. And now what we see is Vkusvil went well beyond that. And in Russia, it has created essentially a big ecosystem, right? Because this is not about only Vkusvil stores, but they also have kiosk, pop-up and train stations. They have vending machines. They have special vending machines in the offices. And their private label has been so successful that competitive retailers are now starting to sell Vkusvil products. So essentially, this is the only example in Russia of a retailer which have started with private label, not with brands, and which has had such success with its private labels that essentially these private labels, exclusive products to this retailer, uh, they became brands. They became brands on their own, being sold in other stores. And what we have seen, if we really look at Vkusville and start thinking about, well, is it really a unique retailer to Russia, or have we seen similar models in other countries? The only ones we see which are somewhat similar are the two U.S. retailers, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods Market. But what Vkusville has done is they have taken some aspects of these two American retailers and they have adapted it to Russia. And by the way, now Vkusville is expanding in Europe as well. Not as fast as Svetafor. So far, just one store in Holland, in Amsterdam, has been opened, but they are clearly also on a path of international expansion. So that's the story of two disruptors. They are quite different, but what's interesting and what's unique about them is that they have not been afraid to take a different approach. Right? They have not been afraid to go against the system, against the set business principles in retail in Russia today. And well, how big are they now, and how big can they get? Well, first of all, I can say 10 years since they've started, they still kept growing very fast. They still keep growing faster than the largest retailers amongst them. And the Svetafor right now is ranked 7 amongst grocery retailers, and Vkusville is a little bit smaller, where it ranks 10th. But it does not look like that their growth is slowing down. They have successfully lived through the COVID crisis, and they keep growing, reinventing, evolving their model. And now large retailers, they really see them as competitors and they are paying attention. So what it means for you, if you're a manufacturer, if you're an international manufacturer or a local manufacturer, and what it could mean for you if you're a large or a small retailer. So I have tried to put together my conclusions in this fashion. Now, if you are a retailer and if you are a market leader today, right? If you are one of the largest grocery retailers in your market now, my advice is don't ignore disruptive retailers model. So they might be small, but they get big very quickly. And they also can shape some consumer expectations much faster than you think, much faster than the large retailers who operate within the normal system boundaries, which everybody are used to. If you are a small retailer, you might be inspired by this story. So look around, look at experiences in other countries, look at retailers in different countries, but don't copy blindly. See how you can adapt models to your competitive context. And if you're a supplier, also large or small, well, it depends. If you're a supplier of a smaller scale, master disruptor's own label strategy, right? Think if there's an opportunity for you and for your products, and think, is disruptor own strategy, is it reflective or is it glowing? Is this disruptor creating private label for image or for margin? So there are many ways to look at retailer private label strategy in detail, deep down, to understand how your products might fit, and if there is a space, if there is a gap which you can take advantage of. And finally, well, for FMCG suppliers, for big brands, for market leaders, understand the role of these disruptors for your business. Understand the role for you and understand the role that you can play for them. So I'm not advocating for listing with these retailers early in the game, but what I'd have to say, don't push them to change, accept and respect their business model. Think how you can adapt, but be careful. And when you think about how you can adapt and whether you should list with them and whether your products fit with them, think about the implications for the rest of your business, for the rest of the trade. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the topic of disruptors in Russia or abroad.
Vadim, thank you very much for this nice presentation. It's nice to talk to you again. I could say that actually maybe you disrupted our standard way of thinking with this presentation, a way of thinking about formats, about assortment, etc., etc. So, and I have actually 3 questions if we have enough time. The first one is a very short one, but maybe most important one. Have you read all these books behind you?
Not all of them, not all of them, but yes, I did make an effort.
I'm trying. Okay, super. So less important questions. What is your advice for Serbian companies that want to export to Russia? So what could you recommend to them? This is the first question. And the second one would be to take one trend that you mentioned that could be maybe successful in Serbia.
Well, for the manufacturers who are thinking about Russia as a market to enter, I would say that the interesting thing about Russian market is that on one side, it's still not as concentrated as some of the Western European markets, right? Markets such as UK or France or Germany, right? So what I mean is that the top retailers, top 5 retailers, they don't have as much market share as they would in Western Europe. So from that point of view, Russian market is still evolving, right? It's still young. It's still at the early stage of the evolution. But at the same time, if you look at what local retailers are doing in terms of formats, in terms of the IT innovation, in terms of the online innovation, and innovation in terms of the inside of the store, I would say that that they are leapfrogging. Right? They are leapfrogging, and they're perhaps ahead of some of their Western European colleagues. So my advice would be to look very carefully at the specific retailers that you're thinking of an opportunity. Right? So there's one thing to think about the consumers and to think about the geography, because Russia has also very different geography, right? And consumer tastes are quite different between, European and Asian parts of Russia. But my key advice would be specifically look at some of the largest retailers in Russia, deep dive into them, understand their business model, understand what they're trying to do, and after that, think about if there is an opportunity, if there is a gap which Serbian manufacturers can fill in. And of course, in order to do this, it also is very important to analyze specific category, right? To look at what's on the shelf, what's in the store, right? What are the tiers within the category, and where there might be an opportunity gap to fit in. So that's my answer to the first question. I hope that's clear. Your second question, Goran, your second question was about the trends, and if I want to take one trend.
One most important from your presentation, yeah.
I think that that the evolution of private label, this is the trend I would choose as an interesting one and as a relevant one for Serbia as well, because in Serbia you also do have some retailers which have a very strong private label offer, and they have they have lots of experience building the private label and building their offer to consumers around the private label. So I think that this is clearly is going to be a new benchmark, and this should really push other retailers in the market to perhaps rethink or evolve or improve or perhaps complicate their private label strategy, so that they can excel with that, and they can really be up to speed in their private label assortment.
Thank you. I agree with you. We all thank you once again for your presentation.